And now a word on divergence. Up until now, the autonomic nervous system has been described as though a single preganglionic neuron synapses on a single ganglionic neuron, but that is not actually true. Usually, I mean, it's a teaching device, right? To make it simple. But usually, a preganglionic neuron branches out into multiple axons that synapse on many ganglionic neurons. This is called divergence. A single sympathetic preganglionic neuron may synapse on 32 ganglionic neurons. A single parasympathetic preganglionic neuron may synapse on 6 ganglionic neurons. So fewer, but definitely not just one on one. Okay, let me see. Now is the time to put down my little slide that summarizes the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system are compared here. They both have preganglionic neurons in the central nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system has a short preganglionic fiber and a long postganglionic fiber. The parasympathetic is the opposite. There is a long preganglionic fiber and a short postganglionic fiber. They both synapse in ganglion that are shown in yellow in this diagram. Then we have a preganglionic neuron that has synapsed with a little neuron here, and this is meant to represent a modified ganglionic neuron in the adrenal medulla. And notice that it is producing norepinephrine and epinephrine, and both of them are being leaked into the bloodstream. On the other hand, if you're looking at a sympathetic nervous system pathway that is part of the sympathetic chain ganglion or the collateral ganglion, then we have a short preganglionic fiber that goes to a ganglion where there's a ganglionic neuron, and then that ganglionic neuron goes to the target tissue. The parasympathetic nervous system has its preganglionic neuron, a quite long preganglionic axon, and then it's shown synapsing on a ganglionic cell. If this was close to the target tissue, we wouldn't be surprised because that's what we expect the parasympathetic nervous system to look like. Okay, so now the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, a little bit about their integration, a little bit about autonomic nervous system plexuses. So you can review this slide, but moving on, the sympathetic nervous system is the predominant source of innervation for the smooth muscle in blood vessels. And when the sympathetic nervous system stimulates the blood vessels, they vasoconstrict. However, most organs are innervated by both the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. And you can take a look at that interesting slide in a moment. The sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems sometimes have opposing effects. This is seen in the heart, the lungs, and the digestive system. And sometimes the two systems work together to control different stages of a complex process. This is seen in sexual function. The parasympathetic nervous system is involved in sexual arousal. The sympathetic nervous system is involved in sexual climax. The pathways are sometimes described as point and shoot. And here's a slide that shows that the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems often have opposing effects. And for example, if you go down to the heart, you find that the parasympathetic nervous system slows the heart, whereas the sympathetic nervous system accelerates the heart. There are many autonomic nervous system plexuses that are formed from sympathetic postganglionic axons, parasympathetic preganglionic axons, and autonomic sensory axons. The plexuses include thoracic plexuses, such as the cardiac plexus, the pulmonary plexus, and the esophageal plexus. and also abdominopelvic plexuses, such as the celiac plexus, the inferior mesenteric plexus, and the hypogastric plexus. Nerves leave these plexuses and travel to visceral organs. Then the last few slides are on visceral reflexes. So visceral reflexes are found in both the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. Visceral reflexes may be long or short. A long visceral reflex would travel in sensory neurons to the spinal cord. Then there would be interneurons, and then information would travel to a preganglionic neuron, a postganglionic neuron, and finally to a target tissue. Short reflexes, on the other hand, travel from sensory neurons to interneurons in an autonomic ganglion to a postganglionic neuron and then to a target tissue, so cutting out a bit of the middleman. In the digestive system, short reflexes regulate and coordinate the normal functions of the organs. Note, the enteric nervous system also controls digestive system activities independent of the autonomic nervous system. Okay, a clinical correlation. Shining a bright light into an eye causes a visceral reflex of pupillary constriction in that eye called a direct light reflex. It's caused by the sphincter pupillae muscle quickly constricting. But the other pupil does not need to have bright light shown into it to also constrict. The other pupil will automatically constrict when a light is shown into either eye. The way that the other pupil constricts, even though the light was shown into the original pupil, is called a consensual light reflex. So the reflex that's happening when you shine the light right into the eye and the pupil constricts is the direct light reflex. But the fact that the other pupil always constricts unless the person has an injury or a disorder of some kind, that is called the consensual light reflex. All right, and here is a picture on the far left. They're showing that the pupil constricts as circular muscles of the iris contract, and that's controlled by the parasympathetic nervous system. Then in the center panel, there's just a normal pupil, and on the far panel, we're seeing that a pupil dilates as radial muscles of the iris contract, and that might occur just in dim light. Okay, so what exactly is going on? Well, when light is shown into an eye, it is perceived by cranial nerve 2, the optic nerve. Stimulation of the nerve travels to the cerebral cortex and nuclei in the midbrain. The nuclei stimulate parasympathetic axons on cranial nerve 3, the oculomotor nerve, to send motor commands to both pupillary sphincter muscles to contract. The direct and consensual light reflexes are tested to find abnormalities of cranial nerve 2, the optic nerve, and the parasympathetic motor neurons that are carried by cranial nerve 3, the oculomotor nerve. Many injuries to the nervous system may cause an abnormal pupillary light reflex, and these include optic neuritis and inflammation of the optic nerve, and herniation of the brain with injury to cranial nerve 3 going down. All right, see you soon.